My name is Jason Burton. Our class is going to be creativity in the beverage world. So basically taking other ideas used in the specialty beverage world and implementing those ideas into the coffee world. So my name is Jason Burton. I work for a company called The Lab based out of Kansas City, Missouri. We started the company a little over 3 years ago. We work with distilleries, wineries, breweries, specialty coffee world, and a very niche market. And under our marketing umbrella, it's everything from PR, social media, design, event planning, menu, and recipe creation and conception. So how did we get into this crazy world, and why this topic? So basically, I don't know if you can see this, but as a young kid growing up in the 80s, experienced Midwest life of beer in a can and camping trips and really bad hot chocolate, and progressed on through the years of moving around the country a little bit and learning a lot about the culinary world. And as a young designer, got to work with a lot of boutique restaurants. So really that was a good introduction to me. I was probably in my early 20s before I was able to really experience taste and talk about taste, since I didn't really grow up in a household that was really a major topic or something that was based on our community around our house. So one thing that's interesting about the coffee world compared to other beverages is that in the coffee world, just like an event like today, most of the audience at these events is all industry folks. So, but when you, the beer world and the wine world, for example, beer fests that you go to, 95% of the people are not in the industry, or just consumers of beer. They love craft beer, they're fans, all that stuff. Same with wine. You know, funny movies been done about wine and beer. And then specialty coffee is kind of new compared to those two segments of the beverage world. And so we are a little bit behind, but that's part of the thing. And this is why, for example, we're here in Boston, not just for SCAA and Barista Nation, but our company, The Lab, a year and a half ago, created a concept called Caffeine Crawl. And really the origin of that, Caffeine Crawl, was because a lot of consumers in the coffee world are enthusiastic, love their coffee, really have a lot of pride in what they drink and the roasters and baristas that they support, but they don't get a chance to meet these individuals and exchange stories with them and learn more about the craft. Where if you go to a high-end cocktail bar or beer bar, you get a chance to talk to the bartender and the staff and really engage and learn more about what you're drinking. So that was part of our Caffeine Crawl concept and why we did that. Now, coffee, maybe more than anything, any beverage creates a true sense of community. And part of that is because it not being alcoholic is that any age group, you know, anywhere from tykes down to, you know, my 90-year-old grandmother drinks coffee. So whether it's an organization, church, college, a lot of people get together for coffee, and it's a lot more appropriate. So that's one advantage coffee has, is that sense of community. Now, we all joke about it, but we also fight it in the specialty coffee world. There's those stereotypes. So everything from the attitudes of baristas and how passionate we are and how that translates to the customer on the other side of the bar, as far as us being maybe a little snobby and pretentious about what we do. But again, that's the passion. And then this old school coffee of image, and the last couple generations before our current generation grew up with coffee for a dime or coffee for a nickel or road stop coffee, and just to get your fix of caffeine and get you going, and taste was not part of the equation what people cared about. So that's a thing that coffee has been fighting, and depending on what part of the country you're in, some areas of the country this is pretty recent. So where craft beer obviously has a couple decades going strong of having an influence and the community, there's tons of craft beer weeks, and then wine of course has a long history in the United States, and outside the United States a really long history. So coffee, again, compared to those, are really new. Now distilleries are popping up in the United States pretty rapidly, and there's now currently, let's see, I know there's over 2,000 brewers, craft breweries in the United States, and that's actually the most in the history of the United States. And we just passed that this last year. Pre-Prohibition, I believe there was 1,800. So it's, you know, it's taken 6 decades or whatever, to 6 or 7 or 8, kind of aging myself there, to regroup and have that many breweries. But the consumers are out there supporting that. In the specialty coffee world, I entered the specialty coffee world in 2004, and when I entered the industry, there was probably 2 or 3 roasters in a state that were considered specialty coffee roasters. Now, in an average size second-tier city or major city, there's anywhere from 3 to 6 roasters in a city. So that's how much it's progressed. Event like this in Boston, for example, I mean, nothing against the history of Boston coffee, but I mean, it's very Dunkin' Donuts based, and huge coffee conglomerate, where now there's so many boutique shops that really specialize in carrying multiple roasters. And that's what the Caffeine Crawl here in Boston did yesterday, was trying to highlight a lot of those shops and bring more exposure to those shops. So we had 18 shops on 3 different routes for the Caffeine Crawl here in Boston. I know. Well, you know what? We are going to, I was telling Tom Vincent this with Texas Coffee School, we are going to do one in Texas probably next year. We kicked off the season this year, Oklahoma City. I believe it was the end of February. And then we had one in St. Louis in March, and then this one. And the first 2 sold out. Oklahoma City sold out in record time, actually, and which was great. And it was just so much excitement. One interesting stat was 1/3 of the attendees, ticket holders, people that purchased tickets for Oklahoma City, lived 2 hours or more from Oklahoma City. So we had people from Tulsa, Wichita, Springfield, Missouri, Austin, and Dallas. So, so that was neat, and really it was cool meeting a lot of the groups from Austin. So yeah, so as you know, we were talking about a little bit of the image of coffee to mainstream America, with your diner coffee and jokes about baristas and so forth. There's also the really beautiful side of the craft and what we're kind of all here for, and to celebrate that craft, and everything from pour over coffees. Again, not really that, I know a lot of people say that's a trend, but really it's not. I mean, the whole concept and idea about that is just to create a better cup. The way America is starting to eat a lot better and focus on our decisions on what we put in our bodies. The same is true for coffee. I mean, roasters are sourcing better coffee, and coffee, unlike beer or wine, goes through so many hands before it gets to you. If you think about beer, once it leaves the brewery, you have temperature conditions and storage, and that's really the only variables you have to work with. Well, in the coffee world, there's so many things. I mean, and then once it enters a shop, the temperature of the shop, how that changes, the shelf life of coffee. All of you know that are really into coffee know that the shelf life of coffee is very short. especially how fragile espresso is, and hitting that right time frame with espresso. So that's kind of the beauty of coffee, is how fragile it is and what it takes, that effort that it takes to bring a beautiful cup in front of you. So some of the things like pour overs and better equipment now, gauging water temperature and pressure, so important, and that's why you see a lot of this progression in specialty coffee. So America's gotten used to, because we have a channel called the Food Network. We don't have the Beverage Network, which I really think we should have someday. But the slow food movement, using CSAs, supporting your local restaurants and so forth, a lot of that slow food movement and that culture is carried into the beverage industry, and we're seeing a lot of that implemented into coffee now. A lot of roasters in a city that might have just carried one roaster for the last 3 or 4 years are now carrying multiple roasters from their own city or their own region. And really, if you think about that, this is just a personal opinion, but I think that's a great idea, because you're really educating the consumer a lot. You're giving them a choice based on the roaster and the style of the roaster, versus just giving them a choice of house blend and here's one single origin you get to pick from. But if you think about a high-end beer bar, it's the same thing. So let's say you go to a high-end beer bar and there might be 20 tap handles. Well, those 20 tap handles are not going to have the same beers. They might have a couple of the same breweries, but you get a good mix of styles, you get a good mix of breweries that might be local, or maybe some that have distribution from several states over. So that's one cool thing that we're seeing in a lot of the coffee shops now, is that that kind of idea and concept being implemented, where you can go into a quality coffee shop now and choose by styles of that origin. And as we all know, that coffee is an agriculture product, so different regions of the world, the harvest dates are different. So Ethiopia would be totally different than Brazil if you're having it in the same month, not just based on the terroir, but also based on how old that coffee is. So it's kind of cool seeing all this happen. And then, you know, some of the ideas you see in the craft cocktail world, we're seeing implemented in the coffee world too. So some of that is the vessels, the drinkware, and how that coffee is being delivered to you. You know, it wasn't too long ago that we were just pushing air pots and putting $1 in a jar, giving $1 to the barista working behind the cash register, and filling up our own coffee. So with stir sticks all over the place and cream and all that good stuff. But now, you know, there's many coffee shops that we see around the country that you have your sparkling water served with your shot of espresso, or milk's even being infused for macchiatos or variations of macchiatos. You know, even selections of demitosses being used based on the espresso and how that drinkware is designed. Serving trays being incorporated into receiving your drink. Another thing, which I love this idea. In the wine world, you go to a wine bar, you can order a lot of flights based on style or varietal or region, or even within the same winery. Now you're getting to see a lot of coffee shops do Brewflight. So you might be able to get Ethiopian Yerg and get it brewed on a Chemex, maybe a French press, and maybe a V60, and have 4-ounce pours of those. Really fun, really cool. I've seen shops in the Northwest do this a lot. Then also just a lot of education about that coffee on signage and so forth when you do place your order. So the nuances of the coffee, the cupping notes and so forth. And that's really, even though to a lot of us that's not too new, but to the consumer coffee world that's new. But if you think about it, when you sit down at a bar and you're getting ready to order a craft cocktail, you have a good description generally. You have time to order. You know, you're paying anywhere from $7 to probably $16, depending on the market, the day, if it's happy hour special or not, but for a craft cocktail. Well, now there's a lot of brews that you can buy, pour over brews, 8, 12 ounces that are $3, $4, and $5. And really I mean, that makes sense. I know a lot of consumers are still getting used to that, but again, going back to you thinking about the transaction that coffee goes through, all the steps versus the steps of other beverages, other craft beverages, and the cost of equipment in the coffee industry is very expensive compared to a lot of bars. That's why in a lot of bars and restaurants that serve coffee or have espresso as an option, it is, you will see generally a machine that is almost like a home machine, really. There's very few bars and restaurants that we notice around the country that have a nice espresso machine and have someone trained to pull really good shots. So one thing too that we like seeing, we've noticed in the coffee industry and we love to see, is a lot more internal hype and pride and getting the word out about your shop. I still think this is a weakness in the industry and something the industry shop owners and roasters can work on, but really seeing a big difference. If you go to a lot of coffee shops and roasters' Facebook page and Twitter accounts, they're a lot more active on updating their daily menu, what was their most recent roast, what coffees they're sourcing and getting ready to bring in. But if you think about that with breweries, they're very, very active on social media, very active. And I would like to see that more in coffee. I think coffee gets a little bit scared about the competitive side and other roasters or other shops knowing what they're carrying and so forth. But I think that's okay because you really want to create a coffee culture and community within your city or your town, and that's what a lot of the beer bars and cocktail bars and so forth have. They'll tell you, if you go to a good bar and you're asking about where are other good places to get a good beer, I mean, we do this around the country, travel quite a bit, and there's always recommendations. So we're seeing baristas do that more, but I think that translates into building those social media channels and chains and really being active on there. So, because the way you got to think about that is, if no one knows what you're doing, it's going to be hard for people to come in and have that understanding before they even come to the counter. And plus, if they don't make it in, here's the thing you really have to think about on social media. You might put out a post on Facebook, and even though no one reacts or likes or comments, there's still people seeing that. And if that comment is not related to just that moment, but it's related to maybe a coffee that you just got in, a new espresso, and you're going to be carrying that espresso for a month or two or whatever, that person might not react to that Facebook post right there at that moment, but they could either tell their friends about it or it's in their mind and they come back later. So just being very active there. You know, again, seeing some really cool things that are used in the other beverage segments. We saw in Boulder, there's, I don't know if you guys have seen the Kyoto style brewers that take several hours, the cold brew process. You'll see a lot if you Google search Blue Bottle or just Google search Kyoto brewer. We saw a shop in Boulder that was using their Kyotos and they were delicious. They were creating growlers to go, just like you would at a brew pub. So what they were doing, and the shelf life on, don't quote me on this, but we do some Kyotos in-house. We actually have a Kyoto brewer, and the shelf life for us seems to be really up to about 6 days. And a lot of people keep their Kyotos in the fridge. We actually keep ours at room temperature, but that's a cool concept that people in this local community that come to visit the shop can actually get a brew to go in a growler and have that anytime they want to serve. And it's great for guests and company, because that's one big thing that home enthusiasts still are trying to get over the hump and the hurdle. Those of us that are in the industry and extremely passionate, we don't have a problem spending 10 minutes doing one pour over and doing one brew with the setup and the cleanup and the actual brew time. For a home user that's getting up at whatever time, 5, 6, 7 a.m., and they want to get their coffee fix going, they're going to want to hit a button still generally. I mean, we're seeing a lot more people buying pour-over equipment at home and using them. But anyway, I thought that was really cool idea that the shop in Boulder, it's called The Cup, was doing growlers of Kyotos. Also, wine on tap's pretty popular now. So we've seen a couple of coffee shops now doing coffee on tap. And the brews that we've had 2 or 3 in different parts of the country, and they've been amazing. So again, another idea from and this was kind of new to wine too, but if you think about, you know, traditional sodas, fountain drinks, you know, being carbonated for a long time, we actually did an event last summer and did a couple of, I believe we did 2 Toddies. We kind of created our own Toddy system and then put both of those, it was 2 different single origins, and actually put those on tap and had both of those available for people that came to the event. It was great. It was fun. So, and then things like just the kind of anthropology, cool design, cool aesthetic look. You know, you think of shows like Friends, where the cafes were lots of big chairs and comfy chairs, and you would get your coffee and sit there for 3 or 4 hours, and people were still doing that. There's nothing wrong with that direction or that look or that design style, but you're seeing a lot more coffee shops really putting architecture and design and layout and involving that into their concept, especially when they open, and just the flow of how a bar operates. I think one of those steps you will see is baristas doing more consulting with future bars, coffee shops that are opening, because you see that within the spirit or distillery world now. A lot of these bartenders a few years ago, some of the best in the country, were bartenders slinging really great drinks at some of the best bars in the country, and then they would get hired to do new bars that were opening and kind of do consulting, help build the menu. And now a lot of those bartenders are brand ambassadors for different spirits and liqueurs and so forth. So I kind of see that happening in coffee. I mean, you have a couple of baristas that really represent a roaster, and whether it's from a barista competition like this, or salespeople that really are on the ground and doing more intimate relationships with the coffee shops that they carry, that instead of kind of just doing a cold sales call, which you would see a couple of years ago, there's really this sense of community and care for the shop, and helping the shop and training them while they're there, and checking on their machines, and making sure they're getting the best brews possible out of the coffee they're representing. So, so we're also seeing things like we've seen some barrel-aged coffee. That's kind of neat. In Denver, a second Colorado reference I made, there was a barrel-aged toddy, and that was really cool. Brought out a lot of vanilla and cherry from the barrel, and you know, this is something the wine and distillery world has been doing for a long time. Infusions with coffee. I even noticed here in Boston a lot of cinnamon infusions with some of the brews and so forth. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. There's where we're based in Kansas City. There's a company called Oddly Correct, and they're doing hops with cold brews and doing what they call hop toddy, I believe is what it's called. So you know, and that world really opens up because there's so many types of hops. So you know, you can match each hop with the characteristics of that origin or what that coffee is known for. So kind of pulling this back around, what we talked about in the very beginning is really trying to bring in coffee consumers into the specialty coffee world, because that's a win-win situation. They get to see the behind the scenes, they get to meet the industry professionals, and they can take that knowledge and education and help spread the word. So not to use Caffeine Crawl as example multiple times, so I apologize, but this is this was the third Caffeine Crawl we ever did. So we just had our 11th yesterday, which was here in Boston. And so this was a year and a half ago when we started. And this was in Springfield, Missouri, which is a college town that, I don't know the population, probably wrong, but 200, 300,000 people maybe. So a small college town. And at this event, I believe there was 150 people that we had at the start of throughout the event, but we had the intros all at one place. And it was just amazing because out of the 150 people, I would say 20 were in the industry. And part of that reason is because, and that's good, that was our goal and that's what we wanted to do. But a lot of the industry folks were actually working the event and representing their shop and hosting the ticket holders that went. But what was so cool about that is you got to spend 20 to 30 minutes at a shop, really engage, ask questions with the barista, the shop owner, or the roaster, whoever was there hosting and representing the coffee shop. And you really don't get that opportunity when you go into a coffee shop. I mean, it's, you know, there's always a line, and the machines are naturally pretty loud to pull shots, and baristas have to turn their back a lot and so forth to move around and grab supplies. So this was really cool, and we're really hoping to see more concepts like this pop up around the country where consumers go to latte art throwdowns, go to barista competitions, of course attend our Caffeine Crawl. So another thing interesting that I think is going to happen within the coffee world is you're going to see more specialty roasters, artisan roasters pop up in smaller markets. So, I mean, we're of course seeing that now, but for example, I believe it's New Elm, I can't remember, but Brau Brothers, B-R-A-U, is a brewery in Minnesota, and I think the town's New Elm. I'm probably wrong, but I think there's 200 people, 200 to 300 people that live in that town, and they have a craft brewery. So there's no reason a future coffee roaster can't set up in a small town. And, you know, your overhead's lower. You know, if you have access to close enough to the city, you can probably get everything shipped in you need, or storage of your green coffee. But, you know, of course now with FedEx and UPS and how fast online is, you can really work anywhere. So that's something I think we'll see. And I mentioned this earlier, but there's now over 2,000 breweries in the United States, most ever in the history of the United States. I wish I knew the number of specialty roasters, and maybe that's something, stat that will come out soon, and maybe it's already out there. But I think you're going to see a lot of new roasting companies pop up, and a lot of baristas that make the transition into roasting. Let's see here. Again, we talked about this, but I'll kind of wrap up with this. Just really be active on social media. Pay attention to and borrow ideas that you see from some of the best restaurants in your area, some of the best beer bars and cocktail bars and wine bars, and watch their social media, watch their Twitter feed and their Facebook and their Instagram, and get to know how they're communicating and how they're interacting with their audience and everything. So hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Again, my name is Jason Burton with the lab in Kansas City, and appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the Barista Nation talks. Thank you very much.